our lives changed in an instant, and it was not something that we could have prepared for.
I had really bad brain fog. There was days where I would wake up not knew who I was, where I was.
It hits everybody in the family differently.
Loving and supporting someone after a brain injury has meant learning patience we didn't know we had, finding strength in uncertainty, and celebrating progress that the world may never see.
When you injure the brain, obviously there's a force that is entered into the brain, and that force changes the neurological circuitry, but it also is going to change vasculature, blood flow, and lead to inflammation, so brain-based inflammation.
There is always hope, and you are not alone.
Welcome to Hope Survives, a podcast from the Hope Survives nonprofit supporting individuals and families navigating life with brain injury. I'm your host, Cristabelle Braden. After my own experience with traumatic brain injury, including multiple re-injuries, I've learned how isolating this road can feel and how hard it can be to find a way forward. No one should have to walk it alone. On this show, we explore the realities of life with brain injury through encouragement, thoughtful conversations, expert insights, and real stories. No matter where you are on your journey, remember, you're never alone, and hope survives.
With a little hope, you can make it through today. With a little faith, someday you'll get through the pain. Just a little love is enough to light the way through your darkest night. Hope survives, a little faith and love. Hope survives, a little faith and love. Hope survives.
Hey friends, welcome back to Hope Survives podcast. Today's episode is going to be a little bit of a different format than you're usually listening to, as we have multiple guests sharing from many different perspectives as we talk about the wide-reaching impact of brain injury. Did you know that a recent survey from the Brain Injury Association of America says that 1 in 4 adults in the U.S. have a history of traumatic brain injury? At least 64 million adults report experiencing one or more traumatic brain injuries in their lifetime. And that doesn't even include stroke and other forms of acquired brain injury. At Hope Survives, we think it's very, very important to distinguish when we use the term brain injury, we mean any brain injury and any neurological condition that could even have similar effects. We serve people who have had neurological Lyme disease, people who have had MS, people who have had all sorts of different brain experiences, whether it's a brain surgery, a brain tumor, stroke, oxygen deprivations, or other types of injuries to the brain. We think it's very important to remember that all brain injuries matter. A lot of the statistics available do have to do with TBI. Did you know that every year 1 in 10 children experience a TBI in the US? And we believe that support for the whole family matters. Whatever age you're at when you get your brain injury, it matters. And there's so much that gets missed and so much that people struggle with. And that's why we're here. So today we are talking more about the wide-reaching impact of brain injury, and you're going to hear from some incredible guests. We have Dr. Jeremy Schmoe talking about the neurological basics of brain injury, and we have 4 people with different sides of lived experience. We have Chrys Dolcé, who is the daughter of a stroke survivor, an adult child of somebody with a brain injury. We have David Colby, who's experienced multiple brain injuries through growing up. We have Lindy Boone Michaelis with us again, who is the mother of a survivor of a 3-story fall that caused a brain injury about 20 years ago. And we have Tameka Wolfe, Vice President of Hope Survives Board, who has been on the podcast before as well, and her husband has had a very serious brain injury journey. It's so important to understand that the impact of brain injury is more than just the person that has the injury. It affects everyone around them. I had the opportunity to go to Washington, D.C. and be part of the National Brain Injury Conference with the Brain Injury Association of America. And it was just so encouraging to be part of the conversations that are happening around brain injury on a national, federal level. Did you know that federal funding for TBI research in 2024 comes out to $3.03 per person affected by TBI? More awareness needs to happen. And when I was in DC, it was really interesting hearing some of the perspectives. And I have some of my notes here that I would love to share with you. There are some new recommendations that are being made in the landscape of brain injury care and recovery. Specifically, there were a group of brain injury advocates, individuals with lived experience, and professionals that represent a bunch of different organizations. To name a few, the ACRM Brain Injury Interdisciplinary Special Interest Group, the BIAA, the National Association of State Head Injury Administrators, NASHIA for short, the North American Brain Injury Society, Pink Concussions, the former U.S. Brain Injury Alliance Department of Veterans Affairs TBI Model Systems, and the TBI Model Systems. And so it's a document about communicating about brain injury, but I wanted to talk about how they are talking about how calling brain injuries mild, moderate, or severe is overly simplistic, and it can be misleading because traditionally injuries have been classified as mild, moderate, or severe based on early medical tests. But these labels do not predict how a person will recover or what their long-term needs will be. People with similar initial injuries can have very different recovery paths, and many factors influence recovery. Sometimes the effect of brain injury are not recognized until much later on. And if a brain injury is not diagnosed right away because it's invisible, right, somebody might not even realize they're experiencing effects until they face new challenges, or they might not be able to communicate or even understand what's happening in their brain. And so it's important to understand that we don't have overly simplistic language that is still in practice, unfortunately. I've talked about this before in the concussion episodes, but when somebody gets to the ER and they're told they had a mild brain injury or a mild concussion, they think that it means it'll have a mild effect on their life because nobody is explained the medical classification system based on the Glasgow Coma scale that defines something as quote unquote mild, moderate, or severe. They just hear the word and they think a mild brain injury is like mild salsa. Not a big deal. When it couldn't be further from the truth. For some people, yes, they recover from a concussion. And for other people, they have months or years of effects. And it's so important to understand that it is not always the same trajectory. It's also important to note that brain injury is a chronic condition. Some people recover quickly, but for others, it lasts a long time. And brain injury is considered a chronic condition, but currently it's not nationally classified as a chronic condition. So that is a change that we are trying to make happen, or that is a change that is trying to happen right now. And saying that brain injury is a chronic condition doesn't mean that people will experience symptoms all the time, but symptoms often come and go. They change over time. It's just better to be aware of the possibility. We also need to recognize that brain injury is dynamic and not stable, and it means that people can both improve or decline in their health and daily independence. Having a chronic condition doesn't mean a person will have a low quality of life, and a person with brain injury needs to be seen as a whole person. There are so many things with living with brain injury, and I love that these conversations are happening in the current landscape of brain injury. Back when I first started Hope After Head Injury, and I was like, I don't know, maybe like 10 years ago, I was making posts and talking about how brain injury is invisible and it affects so many people, and brain injury doesn't define you. And now these conversations are happening on a national level. I love seeing that. So there's 8 recommendations that are being made, including not classifying as mild, moderate, or severe, which is personally my favorite one and the one that I think really needs to happen. There is also a resolution for the World Health Organization about brain injury. And so what is happening in today's landscape is there is movement towards care pathways being more consistent, a national brain injury action plan, and that on a large scale level, there is a standardization of care that needs to happen for brain injury. Currently, there is no standardization of care, and that's why it is so hard to find the right treatment and to find the right care. And that's why we are working so hard to help people to be able to find resources and find hope. So that's the BIAA kind of recap from that trip, and I really loved getting to have those conversations and be part of it. But we have to understand that brain injury affects more than the injured person. And today's episode, we're going to be talking about how it affects the entire family. There's hope for healing and recovery, and there's an importance of connection for those who are going through brain injury and their loved ones. Hope Survives is here to support anyone who's navigating brain injury. We have this podcast as a resource, and you can check out previous episodes if you're new. Welcome. We also have support groups consistently happening, programs, workshops, educational webinars, and more than I can even list right here. Downloadable resources, a lot going on. And so I'm just really grateful you're listening, and you are part of the Hope Survives family by listening to this podcast. So we're going to go into Dr. Schmoe's spotlight on the neurological basics of brain injury. So here is Dr. Jeremy Schmoe, and he's going to be able to explain what happens in the brain neurologically when a brain injury happens.
So thank you for having me. My name is Dr. Jeremy Schmoe from the Functional Neurology Center. I'm a board-certified chiropractic neurologist, and I do a lot of work with TBI, concussion, post-stroke rehabilitation, dizziness, vertigo, balance issues. So basically anything that's affecting your overall neurological wellness and performance. And what I'm going to talk about here quickly is just brain injury basics. So when you injure the brain, obviously there's a force that is entered into the brain, and that force changes the neurological circuitry, but it also is going to change vasculature, blood flow, and lead to inflammation. So brain-based inflammation and a whole metabolic cascade of changes in the way that the neurons are firing and communicating with the immune system. So when your brain is inflamed, we need to do things to kind of calm that inflammatory response down. Initially, there's a response that's supposed to happen, but if that response keeps going and going and going, what's going to happen is it's going to lead to more breakdown of neurons. So neurons that fire together, they wire together. So there's that whole neuroimmunology of the brain that we have to think of. And there's things that you can take, nutraceuticals, like curcuminoids or resveratrol, glutathione. Glutathione storage in the brain goes down after TBI. And just working on general overall gut health, hormones, immune health, and overall just activating the brain is very, very helpful. What areas of the brain commonly get injured? So in our office, we see a lot of issues with eye tracking, the visual system and vestibular system. So when the brain gets injured, there's a force that goes in and it affects midline areas of the brain, areas that basically control how you know where your body is in space, where your vestibular system might not know if you're tilted or if you're in one direction or the other, which might make you feel nauseous or dizzy or off balance. So you can have a vestibular problem. You can also change some circuitry in the cerebellum, which has a lot to do with gait, balance, coordination, movement, and also your cognitive processing. The cerebellum has a lot of interplay with firing up to the frontal cortex to make sure all your thoughts are linked together appropriately. So when we do our rehabilitation and when we're assessing and looking at people, what we're doing is looking at watch you walk, look at your gait, look at your balance, look at your eye tracking. We put it all together and say, hey, I think this problem is more in the cerebellum, or is it more in the frontal lobe, or is it more an autonomic issue? Is it in the brainstem? So we try and localize where that dysfunction is. And then we can get very, very specific with the type of rehab that we do. And then Depending on where your brain injury is, then that'll determine what kind of provider that you work with. So say if you had more issues with speech, maybe you need a very good speech language pathologist. So functional neurology and the type of work that we do, in my opinion, really seems to help with central visual vestibular mismatches, chronic pain, visually induced dizziness, and we have to coordinate care with other providers. If you've seen a lot of other providers and you're still not where you want to be, that's where working with a chiropractor who does functional neurology could come in and maybe try and bring all the little pieces of the puzzle together that other people might not be putting together for you. So that's my brain injury basics, is looking at everything from gut health to immune health to neurocircuitry, developing the appropriate rehab, making sure that you're being seen by neurooptometry, vestibular specialists, speech language pathologists, making sure you're seeing the right people for what your brain injury actually affected.
Thank you, Dr. Jeremy Schmoe, for those insights. The Functional Neurology Center offers personalized neuro recovery programs for anyone going through brain injury and a wide range of neurological conditions. When you trust your brain to the team at the Functional Neurology Center, they take the time to get to know the whole you so they can personalize your recovery program for your unique and complex condition. There's hope for a better tomorrow, and the FNC is committed to helping you get back what matters most. We would love to recognize the Functional Neurology Center as a sponsor of Hope Survives. Thank you to the FNC and Dr. Jeremy Schmoe for your support of Hope Survives through our organization and this podcast. You can visit thefnc.com for more about them. And today we're going to continue talking about just the hope for healing. Brain Injury Awareness Month this year was so wonderful. We had such incredible programs. We had such great conversations. And one of those things was a virtual concert. I had the opportunity to share some of my original music and some of my story and talk about living with brain injury. And we had 4 very special guests. The entire concert is available to watch on our YouTube channel now, but today's episode, we are going to share these next clips from that time together. So you're about to hear from Chrys Dolcé. You've actually heard her voice before because she sang background vocals on the Hope Survives theme song. So at the beginning of this episode, when you hear the part that says, with a little hope, with a little faith, with a little love, that is Chrys Dolcé's voice. And now you're going to get to hear just a glimpse of her story with her dad's stroke and what it's been like for their family.
So my father, he did have a stroke 2 years ago, and it was very unexpected. It was literally right after he helped my husband and I move into our house. He went back to work, and our lives changed in an instant. And it was not something that we could have prepared for, with him being the main breadwinner and really truly the foundation of our family at the time. And so even more than things that you can put a price on, what was the most difficult was the adjustment to who he has become. I don't think anybody can ever prepare you for the changes in personality that comes with a brain injury. And so watching my father go through the different stages of grief, of recovering from who he was used to being, the things he was used to doing, and seeing him have to come to grips with the 2 roads, which is either you can continue to hold on to anger and frustration, or you can choose to keep on going, to identify as a different kind of warrior and make a new life and have a new perspective. It was toiling, to say the least, but I am so, so grateful for this community. Belle was such a big help. such a big help. And now I am absolutely in awe of my father. He 2 weeks ago got his PMP, which in his field is a really, really, really big deal. A guy who absolutely could have could have retired, or could have just been like, I'm going to do something completely different. He decided, no, I'm still going to fight. It's going to look different, but I'm still here. I'm still me. I still have these passions. I am committed to growing as a human being. And so for those of you that have had a brain injury, I just want to encourage you to keep going. It may look different. It may feel different. And those that, the family members that are on this call, it is an adjustment, but it is absolutely possible to find new life and new joy in these changes. I have such a better relationship with my father now, actually. So
I'm David Colby. Long story short, I grew up in the foster care system from baby on. And I was adopted when I was 8. I experienced some abuse, some physical abuse. That's when I had my first concussions. And then when I was 14, I went back into the system and I played football. I was a really good athlete. I was a little small, so unfortunately I suffered 2 really bad concussions back to back. And ever since then, that's kind of when my brain injury journey kind of started. I had a lot of issues after that. I had a stutter at one point. I had really bad brain fog. There was days where I would wake up, not knew who I was, where I was, anything like that. So it was a long journey to get back to just being normal and just try to learn how to talk and function. But I met my wife then, a little after that. And it was a little rough at first, but she really learned to learn me. And so I encourage those who are in relationships or are looking for, make sure that they understand that, because she understands, I've made a lot of progress, and I'm definitely not where I was. But I do still have my bad days, and I have 2 beautiful daughters together. It's 4.5 and 1 year old. And so on the days, when I have a bad day, she picks me up, helps with the kids. There might be a day once in a while where I can't even get out of bed. And she understands that, takes care of the kids for me, and keeps the house running. So, it's definitely a journey, but I'm here to prove, you can get to the other side. And, it's just one step at a time sometimes. And that's what I did. I had to relearn how to speak, basically, and I had to relearn how to count. And it was rough there at the beginning. There was definitely days I just wanted to say screw it and give up. But here I am. And like I said, it's been difficult, but I got a beautiful wife, 2 beautiful kids, a house, and here I am. So
My name is Lindy Boone Michaelis, and I am part of the Pat Boone family. Grew up singing and entertaining, and ended up raising my family. And I am here to share about my TBI experience with my son Ryan. Ryan is my oldest, and at age 24, he fell through a skylight, and he fell 3 stories, incurring a very severe traumatic brain injury and changing the whole trajectory of his life and our lives, because this affects whole families. And it was a very slow, long process with him going through a coma that seemed to go on and on. It was about 4 months, but even after they said he's not in a coma, it was still slow recovery. So he eventually slowly started to eat again, slowly started to get facial expressions. First smile at 10 months. That's a long time to wait for an expression on your child's face. And he got his voice back around 15 months and got to eating again without needing a feeding tube at about 20 months. So these are the milestones that we celebrated, but it was a very long and difficult period of time. And he still does have a brain injury. I mean, he obviously still has a brain injury, but he still is in a wheelchair. He still has a lot of challenges with his behavior and certainly with his memory. But I would say that we have this new normal. It's been almost 25 years since his injury occurred.
What of being a parent of someone with a brain injury, how does that affect the whole family?
I can speak as the mother, which I know that that's a unique position when you've carried this person in your body and I was an at-home mom. I spent so much time raising the kids. And Ryan was very, just such a bright light, as all parents think their children are. But Ryan had this unique gentleness and this sweet character about him that shone through from the beginning up until age 24 when he was engaged to be married. And it affects the whole family because I was completely devoted. My life stopped, and it was every day at the hospital, as many hours as I could be there, coming home to be with my younger son, who was only 13 at the time. So obligations to my other child, who was only 17 months younger than Ryan, my daughter Jessie. And it's this spinning of plates. I call it just spinning the plates, trying to keep them from falling and seeing if you could keep them all up, because it hits everybody in the family differently, as you know. And for me, there wasn't anything that took a priority until people would try to urge me to focus on something else, maybe take a break, and that didn't seem possible. So it's a tightrope that you're walking. I guess I'm using a lot of circus analogies, spinning plates and walking on a tightrope, but there was nothing fun about it.
So what does it mean to build community around brain injury? I know you founded Ryan's Reach, which is a nonprofit that has group homes for people with brain injury, but why do you think community around brain injury is important?
Well, it's so important to not feel alone. This experience is so traumatic, and when it happens, you don't know much about it at all, and it in some ways feels like there's nobody in your life that understands what you're going through. So when you finally do meet other families that are maybe farther down the road than you, it is so helpful because they're still they're information that you need, but they also bring a calmness that you're going to get through it. You start meeting more and more people. You start to link arms with them and realize that there are people going through it. And maybe now this time I'm the one further down the road, and I can encourage somebody that's fresh and raw and thinking that nobody's ever gone through this before. And I can say, I remember saying, I'll never smile again. And that's really the farthest thing from the truth, because over time there are new milestones that are hit, and you celebrate those, and you start to accept what has happened to some degree. And I do encourage people to learn how to accept this day that you have in front of you, and not be so anxious to get to the end of the road. It might be a very long road, and that creates anxiety. But if you can look at today and look for the thing you can be grateful for, and I found that when I practiced that, I could find multitudes of things that I could be grateful for, and that became a habit, and it feeds on itself. And so if you can just find what you still have and not focus on loss, I think that that's one of the things I'd like to encourage your audience to consider, because the loss is great, but there's so much still ahead, and you're going to discover it along the way.
Brain injury doesn't just affect the person who was injured, it affects the entire family. And partners and parents and children and care partners often find their lives changing completely overnight. having to adapt to a new reality of living with this brain injury. And research shows that those who support loved ones living with brain injury frequently experience profound emotional, financial, and lifestyle changes as well. And so tonight we are honored to hear from someone who actually carries that perspective. We are inviting Tameka Wolfe, who is the wife of Thomas, who's living with brain injury. And she also serves as the vice president of our board of directors of Hope Survives. And we're so grateful. Tameka is our just beloved vice president. She also leads the Hope for Couples support group. She facilitates the couples support group and has been on the podcast. So Tameka, I would love to invite you on if you would be able to share.
Thank you all for having me. As Cristabelle said, on behalf of the board of directors of Hope Survive, I really just would like to extend our heartfelt gratitude to each and every one of you for joining us virtually for tonight's concert. You know, your presence, even from afar, means so much to our community and the work that we do. For many of us, such as myself, you know, loving and supporting someone after a brain injury has meant learning patience we didn't know we had, finding strength in uncertainty, and celebrating progress that the world may never see. While others may see a smile or a good day, families often witness the quiet realities and the deep fatigue that cognitive efforts behind simple moments and disappointments come almost every day. It really means defining what normal looks like and holding a space for grief and hope at the same time. And just choosing every day to show up with compassion, resilience, and love. So we are inspired by the outpouring of support from friends, family, and advocates like you. Your participation tonight helps shine a light on the challenges faced by brain injury survivors and their families, and the hope that comes from a community united in compassion and action. So, as you guys enjoy the music and stories this evening, we really encourage you to consider our community. Consider even making a donation if you are able. Every contribution to Hope Survive, big or small, directly supports essential programs that empower brain injury survivors and provide resources for their loved ones and advance the mission of hope and healing. So thank you once again for being a part of our Hope Survives community tonight. And we know together we can really make a difference, one note, one story, and one life at a time.
Thank you for listening to all of these different perspectives. And you can hear more of Tameka's story on a previous episode. We talked about hope for couples, communication in marriage after brain injury, and she shares a lot more of her story there. But today, I just want to thank you for listening and for being present with us for this time. Even though Brain Injury Awareness Month comes to an end, this journey never does. And that's exactly why Hope Survives exists. No one walks through brain injury alone, and we are here to ensure that every person living with brain injury and every member of their family are seen, heard, loved, valued, supported, uplifted, and never alone. That's our vision statement. And we're here to provide programs, resources, help, and know that you can get through this. So we're going to get back to our regularly scheduled podcast interviews as of next week. Thank you for taking this journey with us today. As always, you can connect with us at hi@hopesurvives.org and subscribe and stay tuned as we've got a lot more coming over the next couple months for season 5 of the podcast. Thanks for being here. There's always hope. Bye, everyone. If you enjoyed today's podcast, we would love if you would consider leaving us a rating or a review. We are so grateful to be able to provide this support for the brain injury community. And if you would like to get connected, please visit hopesurvives.org.